All right, welcome to the Marriage Boss podcast. And today I'm really pumped up because I've got a special guest, someone who I just met recently, but I've been friends with for a while on social media. And she also is a contributor and somebody who's fabulously involved with the Good Men Project. Edie Weinstein is a colorfully creative journalist, inspiring transformational speaker, a radio host, a licensed social worker, interfaith minister, a bliss coach, and the author of the Bliss Mistress Guide to Transforming the Ordinary into the Extraordinary. She calls herself an Opti-Mystic who sees the world through the eyes of possibility. And Opti-Mystic is OPTI-Mystic, MYSTIC. Edie, welcome to the Marriage Boss podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on board. This is going to be a blast. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we have some common friends, a lot of people who are doing the same thing that we're doing, and a lot of people who aren't doing that, and that we have been blessed enough to come together. And I have been so nourished by everything I've seen from you and heard from you in our conversations, and I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about, how did you get to this space that you're in today? Just tell us a little bit more about, who is Edie?
Oh boy, I wish I knew. She's kind of a work in progress like everybody else on the planet. I was born into a wonderfully loving, supportive, nurturing family, as you heard when I spoke at the Good Men Project live event in New York back in August when we were blessed to meet. And my parents always told me you could be or do anything you want as long as you can support yourself and it makes you happy. So I have a resume that's 2 pages and growing. I've done a lot of different things in the various human services, personal growth, spiritual fields, healing fields. And at the moment, my full-time job is living my dream. I'm a full-time writer. And the interesting thing is I didn't go to school for journalism. I never planned on becoming a professional writer. My degrees are in psychology and social work. And the bug bit me probably pretty young. As a child, I carried books around like they were teddy bears. So I was a voracious reader, but still never thought, okay, I want to be a writer when I grow up. And probably in junior or senior high school, I started doing creative writing. And then in 1988, my husband and I created a magazine that was called Visions. And we did it for 10 years, from 88 to 98. And then we sold it 6 months before he died, which was in 1998. And the focus was on holistic health, wellness, spirituality, peace and social justice, and it opened the door to a lot of the work that I'm doing now. I have the opportunity to interview what I call the movers and shakers on the planet. A lot of the transformational speakers, teachers, healers that your audience would be familiar with. Mm-hmm. So I did that for 10 years. And then before Michael died, we sold the magazine and I became a freelance writer. And I continued doing the interviews and writing articles that had to do with the same subject matter. So fast forward, and in 2008, I got to live what I call a dream into reality when I got to interview the Dalai Lama. I'd wanted to do that for ages. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because it's a good, how do I describe it? A good tool to consider. If there's a dream or a vision or a desire that your viewers have, that they've been saying, it's never going to happen. It's a pipe dream. It's not. It took me 20 years from the time I set the intention to the time the interview actually happened. But I did processes along the way that had this dream into reality coming to fruition. And some of them involved creating vision boards with photos, with words that were foreshadowing what I wanted. I wrote questions as if I'd be interviewing him the next day. I had a postcard, I still do, a postcard on my dashboard of my car with his picture on it. And I kept talking about it as if it was going to happen. And then I did the hardest thing of all. I let it go. Said, all right, universe, whenever. So that's a guide for me for everything in my life. I plant the seeds, I cultivate, I get support, I get nourishment for it, and then I surrender it. Well, so that's what brought me to today.
I think that the message in that for me is that we have to begin to think about some of these things which we feel are out of our reach as really being available to us, but also the people. Let's take, for example, somebody who is so famous and so seemingly difficult to get to. Tell us how that happened. How were you able to get that meeting?
What
and
was
that
the
interview?
practical part? Okay, the spiritual part was what I just shared.
Mm-hmm.
The practical part was that I have a dear friend named Greg Schultz, who's been involved with the Tibetan rights movement. He's an American Buddhist and has been involved with the Tibetan rights movement for a lot of his life. So he had connections. He kept trying to work them for me for 10 years. And what it came down to was that in 2008, when His Holiness came to Philadelphia, Greg was the event producer for his presentation at the Kimmel Center in Philly, which is a lovely venue. And he said, I'm not sure, I can't guarantee it, but I'm going to do my best. And he said, I told them about you, that your desire is sincere, that you're respectful of the teachings, and that you have connections that can help get the word out there. So we played this kids game. You know the game that says, you're getting warmer, okay. So about 2 weeks prior, I'm at a music event in Philadelphia, and I'm standing there with two friends. One of them is a photographer, and the phone rings, and it's Greg, and he says, are you sitting down? And I said, should I be? And he said, yes, take off July 16th and 17th. You've got the interview. And by the way, you're the only journalist in Philadelphia that he's granted the interview to. I screamed into the phone.
Wow.
My photographer friend snapped the picture. And I had what I called, two things came up. The first was holy shit, abject terror, like, oh my God.
Yep.
And then the other was orgasmic bliss. So I always say, when in doubt, go for the orgasmic bliss. Then imposter syndrome kicked in. And I thought, oh God, what if I can't do this? What if I let people down? What if I'm not that good at this? And that fed it. And I said, wait a minute, you earned this. They wouldn't have confidence in you to do this. They, meaning, the people involved with organizing and spirit, whatever you want to call it, wouldn't allow this if you weren't ready for it. So the next day, Greg calls me back and he says, you still have the interview, but you're going to need to share it with somebody else. They want the Philadelphia Inquirer on board. So I thought, I'm not going to turn that. I was like, nah, I can't. I don't want it if I can't have it by myself. Yeah. So it was, the other person was somebody whose work I respect tremendously. And David O'Reilly is his name. And he was at the time a religion columnist for the Inquirer. So he and I shared the interview. And it's still surrealistic, still hard to imagine that this actually happened. But every time I see pictures of His Holiness or a video, I get a little verklempt, like, oh my goodness, this really happened.
It sounds powerful, for any of us who are in the healing arts or in coaching or in spirituality. It's, it just sounds like a dream come true. And like you said, whatever it is that is your dream or my dream or anyone listening, if you have a dream, it doesn't matter how big it is. It doesn't matter how outrageous it is. If it's real and it's yours, pursue it. I so appreciate you giving us both the spiritual and the practical angle. And I know I read about this in your book. Mm-hmm. So the whole story is in there for anyone who wants to dig deeper.
In the interview,
grab the book and you can see, you can hear all about it and see the interview too, hear about it.
Absolutely. So, and the other thing that I want to share about that is that I feel very blessed to be a voice for the message that His Holiness is sharing, and it's about nurturing and compassion and love, and that we're all connected. He sees himself as being nobody special.
Yeah, I was going to ask, when you're with someone like that, a lot of the times, and I've heard this from other people who have been in the presence of or interviewed seemingly famous, especially gurus and people we hold in such high esteem, they are more regular people than even most of the people we see every day.
Yeah.
So that must have been just mind-blowing.
Oh, it was. And what I took into the interview was two things. One was that my father used to say they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like you do. And in his case, puts his robe on one sleeve at a time. I was going to say, yeah. And then my mother used to say, walk in like you own the joint. Now, it doesn't mean being cocky. It means being confident. Yeah. So I did walk in confidently. And I cried, of course, as soon as I saw him. Yeah. And right before the interview, you do a ritual when you meet His Holiness, where you have a white silk scarf called a kata, and you have it around your neck. You hold it in namaste and prayer pose. He takes it off, blesses it, and puts it around your shoulder. Well, after he did that, he hugged me.
Wow.
And I almost fell through the floor. It was just, fluttery kind of, oh my goodness.
You being the queen of huggers.
Yeah, well, I do that too. So I hugged him back.
That's good stuff. Well, again, a once-in-a-lifetime event, and then certainly for sharing it with us. And I think he would be very proud if he saw you today and was around you today, that you are still emitting the same kind of humility and that spiritual beauty and energy that you did then. So congratulations on continuing to walk that path.
Thank you.
I can be a testimonial in what little I know already that you are still doing that work. So
Thanks.
Congratulations on staying on that path. Okay, so what would your life be like if you could accept your gifts and share them with the world?
You're asking what my life would be like, or in general? Okay.
Anybody. I mean, it's
Anybody.
one of
Well,
the questions
I mean,
we decide to talk
time,
about.
Yeah, I have a hard time accepting my gifts. I have that imposter syndrome that we talked about. When I was on stage, or before I was on stage, the Good Men Project event, I had stage fright. After 30 years of public speaking, I was thinking, oh my God, what if I fall flat on my face? What if I forget the story? What if and I went through the same process that I did with the Dalai Lama interview. And I said, you wouldn't have been tapped to do this if you couldn't do it. And it's a friendly audience, and you told the story a million times, and your parents are going to be there. It was a story, you heard it, but it was sort of a love story about my parents and my relationship with my parents. And so I learned by doing it. And the other thing that I learned is that authenticity and vulnerability are attractive qualities. I used to think it was, that I didn't want to look needy, or I didn't want to look insecure, or that I had no clue what I was talking about some of the time. But what I found is that when I take off the mask, when I peel back the layers and reveal the real, people get to know who I am, and it gives them permission to do the same thing. That's where intimacy, the marriage boss idea, that's where the intimacy comes in.
Yeah.
How can you get to know your partner if you're not willing to be you with your partner?
I like to say the truth is in vogue now.
Truth is in vogue, yeah. Okay.
Whoever we are,
yeah,
it's not easy to become vulnerable, but it's practice. Once you allow yourself to be more vulnerable and more open and more honest and more accessible, you find out that that's when all of the true gifts can come into you from other people.
Oh yeah,
and you can find your own too. So it's a practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much like meditation or yoga.
Yeah.
That I call it my yoga off the mat.
Yeah.
Because if any spiritual practice we do isn't also practical, then what good is it?
Not going to last.
You can't take that. You could sit for decades meditating in a cave, but when you come out, you still got to deal with people and traffic jams and and delays.
Yeah. Wow. So, what tools and techniques would you like to discuss or have at your disposal for going forward?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I believe strongly in is, and I don't tell anybody what to believe spiritually, but for me is a spiritual connection, that there's something beyond and within. I grew up going to synagogue. I grew up in a Jewish home, and I was taught that God was an outside male entity that sat in judgment, and that we had to say certain prayers and have certain experiences. And what I've learned is that prayer is portable, and that gratitude is a huge prayer. I've also, gratitude is one of my daily practices. When I wake up, the first thing I say is thank you for this day. I set intention to have an amazing day and connect with extraordinary people, and every day I do. I say prayers before I go to bed. In the Jewish tradition, there's a prayer called the Shema, which is the signature prayer is what I call it. And it's a proclamation that God is one, that it's all one. So I say that every night before I go to bed. And I set intention for having dreams that are powerful and that are useful. When I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't sleep, rather than tossing and turning, I'll write. So for me, writing is a tool. You can write in a journal. You can write on a napkin. I tend to type, And the good thing is, after being a journalist for so long, I can type with my eyes closed. Wow. So I do that. Music is a tool. I listen to inspiring music. I'm out in nature. In fact, after this, I'm going to go take a walk with a friend.
Cool.
And out in a local park called Peace Valley Park. And what else? Being around kindred spirits. Being around people who feed my soul. And mutual soul feeding, I guess. Hugging, you mentioned. I'm a big toucher, hugger, whatever. And in fact, I do these regular events in my area called free hug strolls. You familiar with the free hugs campaign?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. For those who aren't, there's a man I'm thinking it was New Zealand, named Juan Mann. It's Juan Man, MANN. I think that's a pseudonym. and maybe it means one man, but
Yeah.
I don't think that was his real name. He had just moved to the area and was starting his life all over again, had some major life changes. So he goes into his town square with this sign that says free hugs. And he stands there in silence for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Nobody comes up to him. And I can only imagine what he might be feeling. And then this tiny little old lady whose dog had just died came up to him and went to hug him. And he bent down and hugged her. And a movement was born because other people started coming around. So I said, you know what, I'm going to take this on the road. And I with a friend, I think I did one like 3 or 4 years ago in New Hope, Pennsylvania. And then 2 years ago, I went to 30th Street Station, which is the major train station in Philly. And it was Valentine's Day weekend. So we did a free hugs Valentine's Day flash mob.
Wow.
So we snuck up on people. And of course, we asked, the rule is ask first before you hug anybody. So I started calling us hug mobsters armed with love.
Wow.
And I've done 2 others since then in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. One on Valentine's Day last year, and then one this past June 12th to honor an event that happened in my life. A year ago, June 12th, I had a heart attack at 55.
Wow.
So we did, for my first cardioversary, we did a free hug stroll. And then we're doing one again on September 21st to honor International Peace Day. So the hugs are tools. What else? Did I say music? Yeah, drumming for me. I love hand percussion, drumming, dancing. What else?
So I have a good question for you now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because so many of the things that you do require human connection and getting out there and being in the community and kind of getting out of our comfort zone or maybe taking a step, beyond what normal, regular everyday people are doing out there all the time. How does one begin to take that step when they're either afraid or they feel shy or they're introverted or they're nervous or they're oppressed and silenced? How does one, a lot of people want to do a lot of the things that you're saying, but they're so afraid of what someone's going to say or think or, and so because I meet people every day who are so closed and so shut in. How do we break out of the proverbial shell and start to really live our life on our own terms?
Right. Well, the first thing is to acknowledge what magnificent beings we all are. Nobody is here. There are no mistakes. Everybody is here on purpose, and everybody has a purpose. So acknowledge your own beauty, which is challenging for some people, especially, and I've been a therapist for 30 years who've worked with a lot of abuse and trauma survivors, especially if you were taught to believe that you're worthless. And if you feel damaged or broken in some way, it's harder to take that leap out into the world. So you take baby steps. If you're not comfortable walking into a room by yourself, snag somebody that you might have in your life and say, okay, let's go take a walk in the park. Or let's go to the library together or the mall or something where you're physically out there in the world. And I'm not talking about people necessarily that have agoraphobia or anxiety disorders, because that may need more intensive support from a therapist to deal with. But I'm talking about people who may be shy or have a little bit of social anxiety. Yeah. There are meetups that are on particular topics. So if you like fly fishing, I'm sure there are fly fishing meetups out there. If you like dogs or horses or music or cooking or art, there are all kinds of groups that can help people to get out there among kindred spirits. If you have a spiritual orientation, there are all kinds of spiritual communities out there. I'm part of a number of interfaith communities because in my mind, I say love is my religion and God's too big to put in a box. There are volunteer opportunities, working with children, with animals, with older people, cleaning up a creek, Habitat for Humanity. All kinds of things are available. If you have an addiction, there are 12-step and alternative to 12-step meetings that are out there in the world. What else?
I have
if you are feeling brave, do one thing. I forget whose quote this is. Do one thing every day that scares you.
Yeah.
Not terrified, like, oh my God, scary, but a leap, a little bit of a leap.
I have had so much fun using Skype as a way of connecting with people.
Yeah.
Especially globally now. So if you have to make a phone call after an email or a Facebook message, then you jump on Skype, and I find people are are willing to do that. And it's been a great way to have a face-to-face meeting without the same fear of actually being in the room with someone.
Yeah.
It's a little bit safer if you don't know someone.
Sure.
And certainly globally, it's the only way we can do it. But that has been a great tool for for me to help others get out of their box.
Mm-hmm.
And I've even seen some people take flight, start to get their own message out there and find their true voice after doing it, because then they realize that they can use some of the technology to do exactly what we're doing, which is just to get our message out to more people.
Isn't that amazing? I always say that this would have been science fiction when we were kids, very Star Trek.
Yeah.
That we're having this conversation, and you're in New York and I'm in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And and you mentioned social media. Social media has been a huge, tremendous way of connecting with people that I would never have met otherwise. And I have physically met, as you and I met, Facebook friends in what I call the face-to-face world as well. Yeah. And it makes us less scary to each other. I think. Yeah.
The best thing about it for me was that if you just take your town, and if you describe you and describe me and the way we want to reach people, it's not as easy to get those same like-minded, like-hearted people locally.
Right.
So what social media has done and what this global internet revolution has done for us is it's allowed us to connect with the people who are most like us,
right.
most loving, and the most open-hearted and the most willing and desirous of this type of connection and communication. So our global network and our heart connection is like becoming one. So I think that that's the most valuable tool, for all of the negatives that could occur. For me, it's been nothing but a positive. So to be able to connect with people and then, afterwards to bring your interview out to them so that they can now get to know you.
Right.
And what would you like to tell our audience? What would you want people to know about you? What is the most, one thing that we didn't discuss earlier? What would be something that you want people to know, to leave them with today?
Okay, that they can achieve, experience, have whatever you want to call it, the life of their dreams. And that when they look at the world through the lens of the Opti-Mystic, and we haven't touched on that, and I can share what that is in a moment. When they look at the world through the eyes of possibility and look at their lives through the eyes of possibility, that literally anything can happen. And that the times where I've had the dark nights of the soul, I always know the sun will come out tomorrow, even when I doubt it, because I've had amazingly resilient people in my life as role models, folks that have been wounded in some way by life or by other people or even by their own beliefs. So it's quite possible to overcome that. Like most people, I've had losses. My grandmother died when I was 4. My husband died when I was 40. Both of my parents have died in the last 6 years. My dad in 2008, my mom in 2010. I've had 3 major health problems in the last 2 years. I had shingles on the left side of my face, and there's nothing, can't see it there at all. I had a heart attack on June 12th of 2014, and then a month later I had kidney stones. And I thought, I can deal with that. I'm resilient. I bounce. But when I come to recognize that I have emotional and physical boo-boos too, and that I've rebounded from them, anybody can. So reach out to the people in your lives. Know that you are not alone. That there's somebody there that cares about you, and to believe that you're worthy of receiving that support. And I'm saying that to myself as much as to anybody else watching this.
I do
because
too.
There are times when I say, "Oh no, I can do this. I'm Wonder Woman. I can handle it."
I say it every day. I think the self-talk of gratitude and worthiness is, they go hand in hand. They're like the back of the other hand. So tell us now. Let's dig into this Opti-Mystic.
Sure. Okay, where that came from. Like a lot of people, I get messages in my sleep. I wake up and get a message from God, the universe, whatever. And what I often say is, having been a psychiatric social worker, I know the difference between spiritual messages and psychotic voices. This is not a psychotic voice. And that word came up, that Opti, O-P-T-I -mystic. And the message was, I am not just an optimist. I'm an Opti-Mystic who sees the world through the eyes of possibility. And I thought, wow, how cool is that? What does that mean? And like all the messages, God says, you'll know, we'll figure it out together. We'll get it out there. So I shared it with a friend, and she created a meme on Facebook. And and I'm looking at it right here. It's right here in front of me on my desk. I have a $5 desk that I bought through Habitat for Humanity Restore. And I put decoupage on it, and I have little sayings and stuff all over the desk, the cards, and I have the meme here on my desk. And the picture is of an elephant sitting on a bird's nest with a propeller on the back of it, wearing a top hat, and a little bird sitting on its back. And the quote is under there. So I can send that to you if you want to.
Yeah, I think it would be great to put in the show notes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking at it here, and it got out there. And then on my birthday last year, I get an email from a friend who says, happy birthday. And by the way, did you know that Julian Lennon posted your meme on his Facebook page? And I said, nah. He said, look. So I did. And when Julian Lennon finds something he likes, he writes the word indeed on top of it. So I'm looking at my little meme here with Julian Lennon's indeed on there.
Wow, that's
so
cool.
The elephant went viral, and he's still, as far as I know, on a worldwide whirlwind tour.
Wow.
So who would have thought that was possible?
Yeah.
Okay, here's another story for you. When we're talking about surrender, we never know when we do something or we plant a seed where it's going to land, where it's going to grow. The job that I have now, my full-time job as a writer, came to be because I've been writing all of these blogs on the Good Men Project, as you mentioned, the Huffington Post, Elephant Journal, BeliefNet. And the woman that is my current boss found me by reading my blogs. And she said, we'd like you to come work for us, full-time salary and benefits. You want it?
Wow.
And I said, oh, yes, bless you. Wow. Thank you. So I've been doing that for a little more than a year. Wow. So that happened. About a week ago, I was in a local pharmacy getting a prescription filled, and I walked past this Halloween display, and it's the clown that was in the Stephen King movie It, the scary clown.
Yeah.
And do you remember who played the scary clown in the movie? If you don't, it's okay. No. Tim Curry. Okay. And in my circles, Tim Curry is best known as Frankenfurter in the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yep.
So when I was in my 20s, I used to go there to the midnight show on South Street in Philly at the TLA and dress up in costume and all that.
Throw stuff.
And before the show.
Hold the newspaper over your head.
Yeah. The newspaper.
I did that too.
Guns, the rice, all the props and the costumes and everything. And before the show, before the movie, they would show these MTV videos, music videos. One of them was Meatloaf doing Paradise by the Dashboard Light.
Yep.
Right? And I used to love singing and dancing along to that. And so I walk up to the counter, and guess what song is playing? It's Paradise by the Dashboard Light. So I go home, and I post that on Facebook. And somebody said, mentioned the woman, the female singer that was there with Meatloaf. Her name is Carla DeVito. Mm-hmm. And somebody said, well, did you know that Carla DeVito is married to Robbie Benson, the actor? And I said, no, I didn't know that. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. So 2 days ago, as we're recording this, I get an email from this woman who says, I just read one of your articles in BeliefNet that was it was called Love Poems to God. Two of my favorite poets are Rumi and Hafiz, Sufi poets, and it's what's called ecstatic love poetry. Mm-hmm. And it can be looked at as love poetry, making love to God or a human being. Mm-hmm. So she wrote a book called French Kissing God, and her poems are in the spirit of Rumi and Hafiz. She said, I was inspired to contact you because I saw your article. Would you like to read my book and review it? And I said, sure. And guess who her parents are?
Robbie Benson and Carla DeVito.
Bingo.
Oh my God, that's
and
nuts.
She hadn't seen.
Oh my God.
Message. Yeah, isn't that funny?
That's crazy.
So we've become Facebook friends, and I love her.
Oh my God.
I love the poems. I get goosebumps reading them.
I remember her. I mean, I remember Meatloaf and her and doing that. That song. I remember it like it was yesterday.
The end of time. So
yeah.
I can't.
Yeah. That's when we were doing all our clubbing in the 80s.
Yeah. So those are the things that tell me that spirit is alive. It's not cosmic foo-foo. It's real. It's good. And if that's a message that I want to get out there to people, believe in your dreams. Believe it. I heard a quote that God's delays are not God's denials. That just because something doesn't happen at the time that we think it should, and believe me, I have so many of those where I said, oh, come on already, you know. But then they show up, and it's like, okay, it was like a blink of an eye between the time that I thought of it and it showed up.
Well, I can't remember the exact words or the song, but one of Alanis Morissette's songs where she's talking about, you know, how long do we have to wait? You know, I want enlightenment and I want it now.
Right.
And,
I have to look it up. I don't know the name of the song.
I always laugh about that because, you know, that's where we're at today. It's like we want to be enlightened, but we want it now.
Right. And, fast food spirituality.
Everything is on somebody else's timeline. And, you know, I guess patience is a virtue. When you were talking, I was thinking about how there is something that you do and that you are that may give you this maybe a step ahead, a little bit of a jump on the rest of us, and that you are a conductor for this type of event. You are not only welcoming it, inviting it, you're primed for it. You have decided that you are going to be someone that this kind of stuff happens to. So I think making that decision and saying, hey, listen, I'm open for anything. I am willing to serve. I want to be an instrument, and you're an antenna. You're a conductor. You are always ready to receive the signal. So if there's any message, you know, that I can kind of take from you and give to our listeners, it's that we do have to make a decision if we want to have this kind of optimistic life. Is we have to just make that decision that we are ready to receive. We want more. We know we're more. And so, you know, whatever you call that, if it's a conductor, an antenna, is that you vibrate at a level and you're not going back. You're going to stay at that vibration and increase it. And I can feel it from just being with you here today and when I was with you in person and when you hugged me and I hugged you. You know, I'm sure other people have said this, and after they see this and listen to you today, they will know that you are something special and someone special. And so I want to invite everyone who's listening and whoever shares this and what to get on that vibration with you, because really all it takes is just that connection. And I feel like you are lifting me up.
Thank you.
And I already I can tell you that I've felt uplifted since I met you and being around you and what you stand for. So and I want more of that. So I am making a decision today to say, I want to be on your path. I'm making a space on my path for you. And so I think that's one of the key ingredients is if anybody's looking for a tip or a tool, it's to open up. I love to say open arms, open doors. That's my favorite. And metaphorically and physically, when my arms are open, I can receive, I can turn a doorknob, I can hug someone, I can shake a hand, I can type something. And so I feel like we are all antennas and conductors, and sometimes just making a connection with another person like you makes all the difference. So I feel like any type of connection, physical, spiritual, emotional, social media, face-to-face, Skyping, a phone call, seeing a picture of someone could evoke that connection. So I'm welcoming everyone into our whatever you call this, our lair. Let's invite them into our lair and have everybody take part in that, because it's really the most beautiful thing that I've experienced is human connection.
Absolutely. And I have to say, it's particularly poignant. We're recording this on September 11th.
Yeah.
And I have goosebumps when I just said that.
Yep.
And that was the day that the world changed forever.
Yep.
Nothing was ever the same after that. But one thing that I felt that day, I was working, and people are probably going to think about this too. Where were you on that day 14 years ago? I was working in a nursing home as a social worker. And I walked into one of the lounges where the residents were having breakfast. And I said, what the heck kind of crazy movie are they watching? Because I saw the plane, excuse me, it was the news. And then I realized this is not a movie. And my first thought was, thank goodness some of these residents have dementia or are sleeping and have no clue what's going on here. And the second was, I'm not going to give the terrorists my fear.
Yeah.
Because terrorism feeds on fear. And I said, and I stayed calm, and and that part of that is my codependent caregiver, that I'm just going to keep on keeping on and it'll be fine. So I was able to be of support to the residents that did know what was going on, and the staff, and and I was concerned, of course, about my son, and I had to get a hold of him. He was in school, and and then my sister-in-law and brother-in-law were living in Hoboken, and it took all day to get a hold of them, and thank God they were safe. But I decided that rather than focusing on the horror of what happened, and it obviously is horrible, and there were a lot of people that were lost, I wanted to focus on how do we rebuild from this, and how do we maintain the idea of a global community. And I wrote something this morning on Facebook about that even though it happened on the U.S. soil, we are all us, the word, the letter U.S., that this happened to the world.
Yeah.
Not just Americans. And one of the cool things that came out of it is now a bumper sticker I saw written on the back of somebody's car is, God bless the whole world, no exceptions.
Yeah.
And I have that bumper sticker as well.
Wow.
That's the whole thing that's brought us together. And what's really sad is that it takes a crisis like this, a dramatic and traumatic event to bring people together. So my wish, my hope for the world is that people can do this every day, because I believe we feed the common soup pot. What emotions we put into it feed the world. So folks, as you're watching this, think about what you want in that. I don't know if you remember that story called Stone Soup. Remember that? It's a I don't know if it's a legend, whatever, but it's like a fairy tale kind of thing, where this man was traveling and he was hungry, he had no food, so he goes into this town, and he knows that if he asks people for food, they probably won't give it to him. So he says, I'm going to show you how to make stone soup, and it's going to be the most magnificent soup you can ever imagine. He said, but first I need a pot and some water. And he takes the stone and he puts it in there. And he says, what would be really good in this stone soup? Carrots. Anybody have carrots? And they put carrots in. And then somebody else says, oh, you know what? I have a potato. I'm going to put potato in the soup. And somebody else says, I have a rutabaga, And then by the time the water is bubbling, guess what he's got?
He's got a good soup.
He's got a full meal that could feed the whole village.
Wow.
And that's my dream. I want to be able to have people know that there's enough for everybody, enough love to go around, enough of whatever we need, enough dreams. Just because my dream comes true doesn't mean yours won't.
Yeah.
That the dream will come true when it does. It'll happen when it does, not a minute sooner or later than it does.
Yeah.
So if you see somebody succeeding, you have two choices. You can say, oh, shucks, why isn't that happening to me? Or you can say, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yep.
If they can do it, I can do it. So that's the message I want to give to people. If I can do what I've done, you can do it too.
Well, I think after listening to you here for the last few minutes that you're going to need to be a regular for me, because you got more good stuff. You got more gold nuggets.
Oh.
And I just so appreciate you. I want to touch on one thing that I didn't bring up while you were talking about Visions magazine.
Uh-huh.
Being that Wayne Dyer just passed. I saw that you had, was that your first issue?
No.
Okay.
The first issue actually was with Alan Cohen. Do you know who he is? Alan is a spiritual teacher. His best known book is The Dragon Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Okay.
And I met Alan in 1979. And he was just getting started. And he's probably written 20 books by now. And he lives on Maui, and he travels around the world. And a lot of his work is based on A Course in Miracles.
Mm-hmm.
So Alan was our first cover story, but Wayne was on in 1989. And he was getting started. He had already written Your Erroneous Zones, which I think I read in college. And his work back then was more psychological than spiritual. But as I read the article, after Wayne died, I found the issue, and he was a baby. And if you want, I could send you that image too.
Yeah, that would be great. I saw it on your Facebook, and I loved it because I remember him looking like that when I first got started listening to him, and he was one of my mentors. So
he was for me too. He was
terrific.
Amazing. And I actually only met him for the first time in 2011,
wow.
But I'd interviewed him twice before that. And the second time I interviewed him, he had just had a heart attack, and he had said, I don't do heart attacks. I don't know where this came from, and I'm not going to let this get to me. So when I had my heart attack, I thought about Wayne. I said, I don't do heart attacks. I'm not going to let this go to waste. I'm going to turn it around. So he was diagnosed with leukemia a few years ago. And when I saw him at Celebrate Your Life conference at Phoenix in 2011, he said, I'm well. I'm doing fine. And he spoke for 3 hours on stage.
Yeah.
And he had gone, as far as I know, the alternative route. He had also seen John of God, who's a healer.
Yeah, I read about that.
And when he died, people thought, oh, he died from leukemia. He didn't. Cardiac disease.
Yeah.
And his daughters were really vocal about that, to say, my father taught, he lived, and that's not what he died from.
Yeah. Well, his, I think more than any other teacher, and everyone who knows me, knows that I held him in the highest regard. He was his information, his message, his humanity,
and
he was a regular person.
Yeah. Yep. That was, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the Dalai Lama, the people who know who they are don't have to put on airs. They don't have to put on a show. He, after he got down off stage, he must have been exhausted, but he hugged everybody. He hugged me, he hugged other people. He waited around to talk to people. He was just amazing. So there are grounded spiritual teachers out there. And that's my intention, is to be one of those. A few years ago, I told a friend, if I ever get too big for my britches, I need you to call me on it. And they said, you don't need us for that. You've got Adam. That's my son. Yeah. Adam's there to keep you humble. And he does.
I don't think we're worried about that right now. I think you're going to be fine.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, this was so much fun. I would love to have you on again.
Thank you.
Now, we obviously talked about your book.
Mm-hmm.
Can they find that on the website?
They can find the book on the Opti-Mystical website. They can order it on Amazon.com. Okay. And as we're speaking, and I'm calling myself out on this, I'm writing a second book called The Way of the Opti-Mystic. Okay. And what it's going to be is stories from what's happened since that other book came out in 2011. Certainly about the heart stuff and the opening that has happened as a result of that, and how to help other people become an Opti-Mystic. And it will include quotes from people who claim that role for themselves and what it is that makes them an Opti-Mystic. So I'm putting that out there too. And the book idea full-fledged came to me when I was lounging on the beach in Jamaica about 2 weeks ago. So I said,
when do you think that this will happen?
Oh, it will. Absolutely. It's already done. The universe has already seen it done, and then, I just need to catch up to it. That's all.
All right, cool. Well, we want to know about that when it happens, and it was just a joy to have you. Always great to talk to you and join you, and I'm so happy to be on your path, and just sending you so much love.
Yep, and I'm happy to have you as a companion. We're just kind of skipping down the yellow brick road together.
Thank you.
So we've got a huge group of people doing that. So that's the whole thing too, is that I don't want it can be spirituality can be a lonely path, or it can be a joyous path that you share with other people.
It's a party.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And everybody's invited. There's room for everybody.
Good. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Okay.
My pleasure.